Hello all, it's Luke Coleman with Belting Hill Farms, and today we're going over our build that we've done for some Layens frames. So these boxes here and the table saw is full of the pieces we've made to make these frames. So those two pieces in my hand are the end frames, and this is the bottom of the frame. And the next piece we're going to look at is the top frame, and so these have a groove cut on each end, and the end frames attached to the side of that groove. So you can see there's quite a few parts. The assembly of this is not a huge ordeal, but there's a lot of pieces. So I'm not going to bore you here. We're manufacturing a lot of these pieces here. We're cutting the 3/8 inch wide pieces to make up our end frames, and you'll see the wood that I'm using here is it's not your standard wood you'd get from a hardware store. We run a Norwood HD 36 portable bandsaw mill, and so we have a lot of our own material on site. So this was some 2-inch stuff that I had, so it just means an extra step for me. We got to rip it into 3/8 and then lay it down and rip it to 1.5 inches again. But if you're following Dr. Leo's plans from www.horizontalhive.com, his plans all call for 2x4 material that you'd get from the local hardware store, and all of that will already be 1.5 inches. So you will skip the step that I had. So here we're taking some of the end rails and we're cutting them to size. So after we manufactured them to the desired width, alright, now we're using the table saw sled to do the same thing with the bottom rails, and we're just cutting them to length. Here you'll see that we're taking the top rails and we're cutting that groove. So the reason that looks wide is because I have 2 of them in my hand just to make it go faster. And basically what I did, I have a dado blade. You could do this by making multiple passes, but I have a dado blade that I had set for 3/4 inch. I set the distance from my fence to be where I wanted according to the plans, and then I just ran it over by hand on the rest of it. So these are our end frame pieces, and basically we've got our router table set up. We're using our router table to make these end frames and to basically remove 1/4 inch off of each side of them up to the top. But we found this wasn't working very good. So in the end, I mean, we made 135 of these frames. We made actually 300 of these pieces of the end frames. So what we finally ended up doing was we ended up putting the end frame in as far as it would go, because we have a stop there, and then we just pushed it into the router to make the 2 shoulders, and then I took all of it to the table saw and nipped off the inner piece. We just found that worked better, but I mean, this will work, especially depending on how many you're doing. So here we're drilling the bottom rails, and I made up a bit of a jig for this, and you'll see once we go through, but basically each of them is in 1 inch in from the end, and you'll see the now I've removed the stop block, and that one puts the next ones in a little further, and so it just takes a little flipping around, and you'll see the small block of wood on the left hand side, and that was there because right now we're doing the top rails, so we're using the same jig to do both, and the distance to the center of it is a little bit different. So I didn't put any notes together for that, but if anyone wants any information on that jig, just shoot us a comment and we'll give you the dimensions. But this was just, again, because we had to drill 300 pieces and 4 holes each, so doing 1,200 holes, I didn't want to have to measure out each one, so we just kind of made up this little jig, and it made everything a lot quicker. And as I said, you can see that we just have that little piece we remove, and then that allows us to use the same jig for the tops and the bottoms, and it also does it for all 4 holes. So there we are, we've manufactured all the pieces. We're back to where we had kind of started. We got all those boxes full of the end rails and bottoms and tops, And now we're going to use our assembly jig. So if you, we did make a video about the assembly jig, how to make one. So if you wanted to check that out, we'll put it here in the notes. We're using some glue. The only thing I would recommend that we did not do, we didn't glue the bottom of these. But if I was to do these again, I would glue the bottoms. So we glued the tops, and basically we just put our end pieces in and our top piece, and then we 2 staples on the top and 1 staple on the side. The only thing we found about this jig was that you had to hold the stapler in the orientation that I have it in this video. You can't flip it the other way. So we could modify that jig a little bit if you wanted to. But you'll see there I put the bottom piece in and I didn't put any glue. So in the future I definitely would glue those. Being very careful not to staple your finger. And all I'm doing here is I'm taking the glue that we did put on and just making sure there's none left anywhere that it shouldn't be. And that was as quick as it was. So here we are. Alright, so these are little grommets that we're putting in the holes on the both the top bar and the end bar on these frames. And the other way you could do it, on Dr. Leo's website, he suggests just taking and putting one of your staples, just like from your staple gun, on each side of the hole, so that when your wire goes down, that it pulls on the wire. And the purpose of those is these little grommets is just so when you wire them that they don't cut into the wood. So I just put them on this little nail that will go through the hole, and I can shove them in. Four per side, so 8 per frame. And I just give them a little whack to set them home. Okay, and then I also need 2 of these little nails here, and I'm using just a 3/4 nail, common nail, quite small. And I just put 1 to each side of the first hole, and then as we wire them, that's what we'll tie off to. So that's the top half done. Now I basically just repeat the bottom without doing those 2 nails. And I got the glove on because the pushing that little nail in is hard on the thumb. Okay, and that's that. So now we're ready for wiring them. So you just leave these little nails a little bit proud, and then we'll wrap the wire around those and go through. We'll show you that step next. Alright, so we've got some stainless steel wire here. It's important that the stuff you use that's going to be in contact with the bees is stainless if at all possible. I mean, those little brass grommets I guess are okay, but at any rate, so this is the part here. Pushing the wires through from the opposite side is the most difficult. When you're pushing it through from the end that has the grommet, like right here, this goes through very nicely. That's not a problem. It's when you got to push through from that back side that gets to be a little bit of a problem. And so we just basically take the wire the whole way through the frame, and it essentially makes 4 passes, down, back, and then once we've got it that far, we wrap off the far end onto one of those nails that we had left a little bit proud a little while ago, and then we beat that nail in. And basically, with having wrapped the wire around the nail and then beating the nail in, the nail captures that wire. And then when we go back the other way, all we're essentially doing is trying to tighten up the wire. Now this wire, although it may help the bees build, because you'll see there's no foundation, we haven't put any wax in these frames. Some beehive frames, like some of the Langstroths or a lot of the Langstroth type frames, would have foundation in them, and you could put foundation in these. But again, we're going off of what Dr. Leo from www.horizontalhive.com says, and he says that as long as you keep the hive mounted horizontal and level, that the bees will form their own comb. So hopefully the bees will use that wire as a bit of a guide for them to build the comb. But the main thing the wire is for is so that when you put this frame into an extractor to remove the honey, that the frame won't come apart because of the centrifugal force. Because these frames will hold, not exactly sure how much weight of honey, but it will be, more than 1 pound. It would be probably like, 5 to 10 pounds per frame, and it could be 20. I don't really know. With all that centrifugal force, they'd be easy to come apart. So here you see, like I said, we wrap the wire around that nail, and we're just going to put that nail back in, and now we've got one end that we can start tightening from. So we just kind of pull that up. We use the pliers to pull it up tight, and then you'll see that we use our thumb to kind of, once it's up tight and it's bent over at 90 degrees, it will hold pretty good. And that's all we're doing. We just keep chasing that back towards the front of it again. So there, we bent it over again, and we pull down, bend it there. And again, these don't have to be zinging tight. They just need to be, tight. And these are, again, for once we extract these. That's way down in the future. We're not anywhere near that yet. I don't even have an extractor at this point. When it comes time for that, I'll most likely build one. Although there are Layens frame extractors that are available. And so here we've got it tightened up, and the last step is to knock that nail in and clip off the wire, and that frame is wired. So we only have 149 more to do. Alright, so here's a bit of a close-up. So there's the nail that you see we wrapped the wire around and then knocked it in, and the little grommets. And there's the nail on the other side that we wrapped around and knocked in. And you can see there that the wire comes down, back up, down, and back up again. And so it's basically 4 passes of the wire, each of them through those grommets. Alright, so here's all of our frames built. We cut parts to make 150 of them, but in the end, just from deformities and such, we ended up with only 135 complete, which is more than enough. We've built 10 of the swarm traps, which require 6 each, and we're also intending to build 3 hives, which each take 20. And there's all of our tops completed, so we're hoping to see you all come back and check out our hive build and the rest of our videos about hanging these swarm traps and hopefully finding some bees.